The girl on the rooftop of my apartment building. Mr. Nightmare-style long horror voiceover script. This happened when I was in college, and even now, years later, it's still the one story I never liked telling out loud after dark. At the time, I was attending school in Houston, Texas, and living off campus with 5 other guys in an apartment building near the edge of the city. It wasn't some luxury high-rise, but it also wasn't a dump. It was one of those older apartment buildings that had probably been renovated just enough to keep attracting students and young professionals. The rent was decent, the neighborhood was quiet enough, and the biggest selling point for us was the fact that our apartment was on the top floor. The building had 10 floors total, and our unit was on the 10th. The apartment itself was actually pretty nice for college housing. 3 bedrooms, a decent living room, a kitchen that wasn't falling apart, a balcony overlooking part of the city, and, most important to us, roof access. Technically, the rooftop was shared by the whole building, but almost nobody ever used it. Maybe management didn't really want people up there, but the door was never locked, and nobody stopped us. So me and my roommates basically claimed it as our hangout spot. Almost every night after finishing homework, gaming, or just messing around in the apartment, we'd head up there with drinks, snacks, a speaker, sometimes even cards, and just sit around talking. It was one of those places that felt weirdly peaceful, especially for a city. You could see a lot of the skyline from up there. At night, the traffic noise sounded distant enough that it became background noise. It felt like we had found our own secret place above everybody else. That's probably why what happened there messed me up as badly as it did. One weekend, almost all of my roommates went home to visit family. The only ones left in the apartment were me and my friend Scott. We were both in the living room that night trying to get assignments done. At around 1:00 in the morning, Scott finally gave up and said he was exhausted. He headed to bed. I stayed up a little longer trying to finish some class project on my laptop, but after another half hour I realized I was just staring at the screen without actually doing anything. I couldn't focus. I wasn't tired enough to sleep, but I was too mentally drained to work. So I did what I'd done 100 times before. I grabbed my phone, put in my earbuds, and went up to the roof to clear my head. Nothing about that felt unusual. The night was clear. The moon was full and bright enough that I barely needed the rooftop lights to see. The air was warm, probably in the low 70s, and there was barely any wind. It was one of those still nights where everything feels almost too quiet, but not in a bad way. Just calm. I sat near the middle of the roof, leaned back against one of the low concrete structures, and started listening to music while scrolling through my phone. For the first 30 minutes, everything felt completely normal. Relaxing, actually. Then, out of nowhere, I got cold. And I don't mean normal cold. Not a breeze picked up cold. I mean the kind of cold that hits your entire body at once. My arms broke out in goosebumps. My jaw tightened. It felt like the temperature had dropped 20 degrees in a matter of seconds. I remember pulling my hoodie tighter around me and looking around, confused. The air hadn't changed in any visible way. There was still no wind. The city noise in the distance hadn't changed either. But something about the rooftop suddenly felt dead. That's the best way I can explain it. Dead. Like everything warm about the place had been pulled out of it. That should have been my sign to leave immediately. But because I'd been up there so many times before without anything weird happening, I convinced myself I was just tired or overreacting. I stayed another 15 or 20 minutes trying to ignore it. Eventually, I stood up, figuring I'd go back downstairs. And that's when I noticed her. She was sitting in the far corner of the roof near the utility pipes and old ventilation units. That part of the rooftop was nasty. Behind that side of the building there was an old drainage canal, a row of dumpsters, and a vacant lot full of trash and weeds. Even during the day, it smelled bad over there. Nobody ever sat near that side if they could help it. But there she was, a girl. She was sitting on the ground with her back partially turned toward me. Her long dark hair was hanging down over her shoulders. Her head was lowered. From where I was standing, she looked young, maybe 17 or 18. At first I thought she had to be someone from another apartment in the building. Maybe she was upset, maybe crying, maybe on the phone. Then another thought hit me almost immediately. What if she was planning to jump? It was late. She was too close to the ledge. She was sitting in the worst possible corner of the roof, alone at around 1:30 in the morning. So I started walking toward her, slowly, trying not to startle her. That's when I noticed that she was moving in a strange way. Her shoulders were shifting, her arms were jerking slightly, her head kept dipping and lifting. At first I thought maybe she was crying really hard. But as I got closer, I realized that wasn't what she was doing. She was eating something. Not snacking. Not casually picking at food. I mean, she was tearing into something. Violently, fast. Like an animal that had been starving for days. The sound reached me before I fully understood what I was hearing. Wet chewing. Messy, rapid biting. Tearing. She was hunched over whatever it was in her lap and pulling pieces off with both hands, shoving them into her mouth. I stopped maybe 15 feet away and just stared for a second, trying to process what I was looking at. Then I said, "Hey, you okay?" The second I spoke, she froze. Completely. The chewing stopped. The entire rooftop went dead silent. She didn't answer, didn't move, didn't even turn around. I stood there feeling stupid and uncomfortable. Then I asked again, a little louder, "Are you all right? Do you need help?" Still nothing. She stayed perfectly still. At that point, I was already getting a really bad feeling, but I asked one more time anyway. And that's when she slowly lifted her head. Even now, I honestly don't think I can fully describe what I saw. Her face was wrong. That's the only word that fits it. Wrong. Her skin was pale white in a way that didn't look natural. Not pale like somebody who doesn't get sun. Pale like all the blood had been drained out of her body. Her eyes were red, deep red. But in the moonlight they looked almost black around the edges. Her hair was wild and tangled. Her mouth and chin were smeared with something dark. Blood. Or something close enough to blood that my brain didn't care about the difference. And hanging partway out of her mouth was what looked like a human hand, at least part of one. A small one. She stared directly at me, didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't react like a normal person who'd just been caught doing something horrifying. She just stared. And then, she smiled. I ran. I didn't say anything, I didn't think. I just turned and sprinted as hard as I could across the rooftop. I didn't look back, didn't even want to know whether she was standing up or following me. Then I slammed directly into one of the rooftop vent pipes. Hard. It felt like I ran face first into a steel post. There was a loud metallic bang, a burst of pain, and then everything went black. When I woke up the next morning, I was in my bed. Scott was there. So was the building manager and the maintenance guy. Apparently, the maintenance guy had found me unconscious on the roof early that morning during one of his routine checks. He got the manager, and together they carried me downstairs. They asked me what happened. I told them everything, every single detail. Scott looked completely freaked out. The maintenance guy went pale fast enough that I noticed it immediately. But the manager's reaction was the weirdest. He got really quiet. Then, almost too quickly, he started telling me I must have hit my head before I saw anything clearly. He said I was probably half asleep, confused, maybe concussed. Then he got strangely irritated and started scolding me for going to the rooftop by myself that late at night. It didn't feel like concern. It felt like he was trying to shut me up. That made me suspicious right away. For the next 3 days, I had a fever. Every time I slept, I dreamed about her. Same pale face. Same eyes, same dark stuff smeared around her mouth, same smile. In every dream, she wasn't attacking me. She was just watching me, waiting. By the fourth day, I was convinced something was seriously wrong with that building. So I caught the maintenance guy alone in the parking garage and asked him directly, "What happened here?" At first, he denied everything. Said there was no story. Said people made things up all the time. But after enough pressure, and probably because he could tell I wasn't going to let it go, he finally told me the truth. Years before we moved in, a young married couple had lived in our exact apartment. According to him, the husband was a drug addict. He gambled constantly, drank heavily, and beat his wife. The whole building knew about it. People heard them fighting all the time. One night, things got worse than usual. His wife was 7 months pregnant at the time. He came home high and demanded money. She refused. He beat her badly enough that neighbors were close to calling the police. Sometime later that same night, she went up to the roof, to the exact same corner by the utility pipes, and she hanged herself. The next morning, they found her there, still pregnant, still hanging. A week later, her husband died in a car accident. According to the maintenance guy, management tried to keep the whole thing quiet because tenants started moving out after rumors spread. Some people said they heard crying on the rooftop. Others said they saw a woman standing near the ledge late at night. One tenant apparently claimed she saw blood dripping down the wall near the stairwell door, but when she brought other people back, it was gone. When he finished telling me all of that, I felt sick, because deep down I already knew what I'd seen. Or at least what I thought I'd seen. That thing on the rooftop was her. Or whatever had been left behind after that kind of death. And somehow I had walked in on it while it was feeding. After that, none of us ever went back to the roof at night. Honestly, we barely went during the day. And the weird thing is, once I knew the story, I started noticing little things I'd never paid attention to before. The rooftop door always felt heavier at night. The stairwell outside our floor always smelled damp and metallic after midnight. Sometimes from our balcony, I'd catch myself glancing upward toward the roofline and feeling like someone was already looking down at me. A few weeks later, Scott saw her too. He was in the kitchen around midnight getting water. The balcony curtains were open, and he happened to glance out through the glass. Then he froze. He said there was a woman standing on the rooftop ledge directly above our apartment, looking down at our window, motionless. He swore it was the same girl I described. Long, dark hair, pale face, eyes too dark. He said she just stood there staring until he panicked and yelled for me. By the time I got there and looked outside, she was gone. That shook both of us pretty badly. After that, other stories started surfacing. One woman on a lower floor told us she heard crying on the roof almost every night around 2 a.m. Another tenant claimed she saw wet, barefoot footprints leading from the stairwell to her apartment door. The footprints were dark, like they were made of muddy water or something thicker. They stopped right outside her door and then just ended. Another guy said he once heard someone walking slowly above him even though the roof had already been locked for the night. Management denied everything, obviously. Anytime anyone brought it up, they either acted annoyed or pretended it was all exaggerated. Not long after that, the building changed the rooftop policy and locked access every night at 8 p.m. They never gave a real reason. We didn't ask. By then, we didn't want to know anything else. When our lease finally ended, every one of us moved out. Nobody even tried to argue for staying. It didn't matter how convenient the place was or how good the rent had been. We were done. That was 6 years ago. I still think about that night more than I want to admit. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night for no reason, and for a few seconds I'm back there on that rooftop under the full moon, staring at the girl in the corner before she turns her face toward me. And the worst part is, when I remember her expression, it never feels like she was angry. It never feels like she was surprised either. If anything, it felt like she had been waiting for somebody to notice her, waiting for someone to get close enough, waiting for someone to interrupt her, waiting for someone new. So if you ever end up living in an apartment building where rooftop access is suddenly restricted and nobody wants to tell you why, take my advice. Don't go up there after dark. And if you see somebody sitting alone in the corner of the roof, especially if they seem to be eating in the shadows, don't call out to them. Don't get closer. And whatever you do, don't wait for them to look up. The black dog curse that destroyed my family. Mr. Nightmare-style horror story. My name is Farid Blackwood, and what happened to my family is the reason our old estate in Louisiana has been abandoned for over 30 years. People around here still call it cursed. Honestly, after everything I saw, I believe them. My father, Elias Blackwood, was one of the wealthiest men in our county. We lived on a huge estate outside a small town near Black Hollow, Louisiana. The truth is, though, most of that wealth wasn't earned fairly. My father had 2 older brothers, Arthur and Zach. And when my grandfather got sick, my father and grandmother manipulated him into rewriting the will. By the time my grandfather died, almost the entire estate had been left to my father. Arthur and Zach got almost nothing. They hated him after that. And looking back now, I think that hatred is what doomed us. It started on the night of my older brother Daniel's wedding. Everything had been going fine. The reception was being held outside on the estate lawn. There were probably over 100 people there. Then, out of nowhere, this massive black dog walked onto the property. And when I say massive, I mean bigger than any dog I've ever seen. Its fur looked almost wet, even though it hadn't rained. It walked straight through the crowd like nobody could stop it, then lunged at my brother and bit him hard in the leg. People chased it off, but none of us ever figured out where it came from. A few days later, Daniel got sick, really sick. At first, everyone thought it was an infection. Then he started screaming whenever anyone brought water near him. He foamed at the mouth, had seizures, and within a week, he died. It was one of the worst deaths I've ever witnessed. We buried him on the family property. The next morning, one of the workers came running into the house screaming. My father and I ran outside. Daniel's grave had been dug up, and his body was floating in the pond behind the house. His head was gone. That was the moment things stopped feeling explainable. Not long after that, our old groundskeeper, Mac, came banging on our front door after midnight. He was pale, sweating, could barely talk. He kept repeating, "It was Daniel, it was Daniel." Eventually, he told us he had seen a headless body chasing him down the dirt road and said it sounded like my brother's voice. At that point, my father still refused to believe anything supernatural was happening. He thought somebody was playing sick games with us. But then my mother changed. One night, she was pulling water from the old well behind the house. Suddenly, she screamed. By the time we got there, she was halfway inside the well, like something had dragged her down. We pulled her out. After that, she was never normal again. She stopped eating.